For days, that cat lay on the same sidewalk, invisible to those passing by in a hurry. People looked away, changed sides, pretended not to see. Some frowned, others quickened their pace. No one stopped. The rain came, the cold tightened. The cat's body weakened. Every hour there was a greater risk. He no longer meowed, no longer stood up. It was as if time were running out in silence, until, when there was almost no strength left, different footsteps emerged. An old gentleman slowed his rhythm. He stopped, and in that instant, everything that seemed lost began to change. For a long time, that street was just a place of passage. People came and went every day, trapped in their own schedules, problems and distractions. In the middle of this constant flow, the cat appeared almost without being noticed. At first, he still walked a few meters, tried to move away from the hurried feet, sought shelter under cars. As the days passed, he grew weaker. He stopped reacting. He chose a spot on the sidewalk and remained there as if he had accepted that no one was going to stop. The cat was not aggressive nor flashy. He didn't meow loudly, didn't approach anyone. He was just there, too small to bother, too invisible to matter. People saw him, but didn't truly see. Some felt pity for a second and moved on. Others convinced themselves that someone must already be taking care of him. Most simply walked straight past. And so the street continued functioning as always, while the cats... And time ran out. The rain left the ground cold and slippery. The night brought a heavy silence, broken only by hurried footsteps and distant engines. The cat's body began to fail. There was no visible drama, just a growing slowness, a profound exhaustion. Every breath seemed harder than the one before. Still, no one stopped. Life continued happening around him, indifferent. Until in one of those ordinary moments when everything seemed to follow the same pattern, something different happened. It wasn't a cinematic rescue. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was just someone who slowed down, an old gentleman who, unlike all the others, did not look away. He stopped when there was almost no time left, and this small act, performed too late for many, completely changed that cat's destiny. If this story has already started to touch you, leave your like now. It helps the channel a lot. Subscribe too, because I have a dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription makes an enormous difference. And tell me in the comments, from which country are you watching this story? The cat did not arrive on that street suddenly. He lingered. First, he appeared during the empty hours, walking close to the walls, observing human movements from a distance. Then he began to emerge during the day, sitting near closed shop windows, taking advantage of small shadows. In the beginning, he still reacted when someone approached too closely. He would stand up with effort, walk a few meters, and stop again. Over time, this effort began to cost more than he could afford to pay. The street was noisy during the day, but indifferent. Footsteps passed around the cat as if he were just another detail of the ground. A few quick glances were cast in his direction, followed by immediate avoidance. No one wanted to claim that image. The cat felt this in his body. He felt that he was not wanted, but he was not hated either, and this neutrality hurt more than any aggression. In the first few days, he still waited. He waited for someone to stop, for a hand to reach out, for a voice to change its tone. He watched the shoes, the hems of trousers, the hurried movements. Each person seemed to carry their own urgency. His did not matter. His time ran at another rhythm, slower and more cruel. Hunger began to mix with exhaustion. His thin body could no longer conserve heat properly. The cold ground stole his strength silently. The cat began to choose positions that required less effort to breathe. He would lie on his side, then adjust himself again. Every movement was calculated. Every attempt to stand up was accompanied by a silent doubt. Is it worth it? The rain arrived without warning. First thin, almost gentle, then heavier, persistent. Water ran down the sidewalk and gathered in small puddles around the cat's body. His fur stuck to his skin, making the cold even more intense. He tried to move to a slightly drier place, but he couldn't go very far. He stopped again, now closer to the gutter. The world began to seem distant, as if it were being observed from behind glass. People kept passing by. Some complained about the rain. Others protected their cell phones. Others simply kept looking straight ahead. The cat was there, visible enough to be avoided, too invisible to be helped. At times, someone would slow their pace, look for a second longer, and move on. This extra second was almost worse. It created an expectation that died immediately. At night, the street changed its tone. The lights reflected on the wet asphalt, creating elongated shadows. The movement decreased, but it did not cease. The cat no longer reacted to every person. His eyes remained half open, following only the closest sounds. His breathing was irregular. There was no intense pain, just a profound weariness, as if his body were giving up bit by bit. At some point, he stopped trying to draw attention. He stopped meowing. He stopped moving when someone passed too close. The survival instinct, which once made him react, now gave way to something more silent: acceptance. Not a conscious acceptance, but absolute exhaustion. The world went on. He stayed. The next day was born grey. The cat opened his eyes with difficulty. The cold of the night had left his body even heavier. He tried to stand up, failed, and remained lying down. The noise of the street returned gradually. Footsteps, conversations, engines. Everything seemed to happen at a distance impossible to reach. Time moved on, but for him, every minute was an invisible struggle. Some children ran past, laughing loudly. They didn't even notice the cat. A man diverted his path so as not to get his shoes wet. A woman looked quickly and quickened her pace. No one stopped. The street continued fulfilling its function, taking people from one point to another. The cat was not part of that logic. His body began to tremble slightly, not from fear, but from cold. The cat tried to curl up more, seeking to conserve the little heat he still had. His vision blurred for a few moments. Sounds began to mix. He blinked slowly, trying to stay conscious. The world seemed to slip away. It was in this state that different footsteps emerged. Not hurried, not indifferent. Footsteps that slowed their rhythm. The cat did not open his eyes immediately. He no longer expected anything. But something in the sound made him blink again. A pair of shoes stopped in front of him. The world seemed suspended for a second. The cat tried to raise his head, but he couldn't. Still, he felt something different in the air. Not haste, not rejection, just presence. The old gentleman stood there for a few seconds, observing in silence. He said nothing. He didn't lean down immediately. He just stood still, like someone who needed to understand what he was seeing, and in due instant, when the cat no longer had the strength even to ask for help, something changed. Not in a grand way, but definitively. For the first time in days, someone did not pass straight by. For the first time, time slowed down for someone other than him. And that was enough to change everything. The old gentleman did not hurry. That detail to anyone else would seem irrelevant. To the cat, it was everything. For days, everyone passed by far too fast to see, too fast to feel, too fast to take responsibility. That man, on the contrary, stood still. The silence between them was not empty. It was heavy, laden with something the cat could not name, but recognized as different. The man leaned down slowly, resting one hand on his knee. His face showed the marks of time, deep lines that came not just from age, but from stories too long to be told there. He observed the cat for several seconds without touching him, as if evaluating something beyond the obvious. There was no disgust, no haste, no exaggerated pity. There was attention. The cat tried to move when he felt the approach, a weak reflex, almost automatic. His body responded with a slight tremor and then gave in. He no longer had the energy to flee. He no longer had the energy even to pretend he didn't need help. The old man noticed this immediately. His eyes narrowed, not in judgment, but in contained concern. He extended his hand slowly, stopping halfway. He waited. The cat did not react. Not because he accepted the touch, but because he no longer had the strength to reject it. The man carefully touched the side of the animal's body and felt the excessive cold, the rigidity that came not from aggressiveness, but from exhaustion. That was not a cat resting. It was a body struggling to go on. Around them, the street remained alive. People passed by. Some slowed their pace upon seeing the scene. Others simply diverted. No one joined in. No one asked if help was needed. The old gentleman noticed this too. There was something profoundly wrong with that normality that continued while that animal was about to vanish. He took off his coat with difficulty, folding it carefully before placing it around the cat. The fabric was worn, but warm. The cat felt the difference immediately. It wasn't full comfort, but it was enough relief for his breathing to become slightly less irregular. Still, his body remained weak. Time remained short. The old man murmured something low, simple words, without false urgency. It wasn't a speech. It was a calm presence trying not to startle. He looked around, quickly evaluating the options. There was no box, no nearby shelter. Just that cold, open street. He knew he needed to act fast, but without sudden movements. With effort, the man tried to lift the cat. The body was far too light, a weight that should not be so small. The cat made a low sound, almost inaudible, more a reflex than a plea. The old man stopped immediately, adjusted his position, better supporting the fragile body. Every gesture was measured, every second counted. Some people were now watching from a distance. They did not interfere. They did not help, they just watched. The collective indifference was slowly transforming into belated curiosity. The old man did not look at them. His focus was singular. He felt that if he wasted time explaining, he would lose something more important. He walked slowly, holding the cat close to his chest, protecting him from the wind. The cat felt human heat crossing the thin fabric of the coat. It was strange. He had spent so much time without contact that this proximity seemed unreal. Part of him still expected to be cast aside again. Another part, smaller, began to cling to that heat as a last chance. The path seemed too long. Every step the old gentleman took was heavy, not just from the physical effort, but from the weight of the responsibility he had assumed. He knew that cat might die anyway. He knew he might have stopped too late. Still, he kept going, because stopping now would be repeating the gesture of everyone else. The cat began to lose a clear sense of his surroundings. Sounds. Mixed together, lights grew hazy. He felt the movement, felt the slight swaying, felt the man's heart beating close by. It was a constant, firm sound, different from the chaos of the street, different from the cold silence of the sidewalk. It kept him conscious for a few more minutes. The old man reached a point where he needed to make another decision. He stopped again, took a deep breath, and changed direction. Instead of heading home, he turned into a side street. The cat did not know it, but that choice was crucial. There was a small veterinary clinic there, almost hidden, with the light still on despite the hour. The old man knocked on the door with controlled force, once, twice, 3 times. Time seemed to stretch cruelly. Inside, hurried footsteps approached. The door opened partially. The old man spoke quickly, directly, without dramatizing. He showed the cat. He didn't need to explain much. The state of the animal spoke for itself. The cat was taken inside almost immediately. The heat changed again. The smell changed. Different hands touched him, now with technical urgency. He felt his body being supported, felt something soft beneath him. He didn't understand what was happening, but he felt he was no longer alone. Before losing consciousness completely, the cat opened his eyes one last time. He saw the old gentleman standing a few meters away, watching in silence. There was no guarantee in his gaze. There was no promise. There was only presence. And that, in that moment, was enough. Because if the old man had passed straight by like everyone else, none of this would be happening. If he had stopped a minute later, perhaps it would have been too late already. The line between life and disappearance was crossed there in that simple gesture, performed almost at the last possible instant. And while the cat struggled to stay alive, something larger began to form outside that room. The story of an animal ignored by everyone, saved by someone who decided to stop when no one else stopped. The first moment inside the clinic was not one of relief. It was one of silent urgency. The cat was placed on a heated surface, and experienced hands began to move around him with contained speed. There was no visible desperation, only focus, the kind of focus that arises when the ideal time has already passed, but isn't entirely over yet. The cat's body barely reacted. His breathing was weak, irregular. His eyes remained half open, as if he were trapped between two places, unable to decide in which to stay. The old gentleman remained a few steps away. He asked nothing at first. He did not interfere. He simply watched, his hands joined in front of his body, like someone who understands that certain situations demand silence. He felt the weight of that moment in a way too deep to be explained there. It wasn't just concern for an animal. It was the return of something ancient, something he believed he had left behind. As the professionals evaluated the cat, the old man sat down slowly in a chair near the wall. His movements were slow, not just from age, but from the emotional burden beginning to take hold. The room had a specific smell, a mixture of cleaning products and something metallic. To the cat, this smell was strange but not threatening. There was heat there. There were firm hands. There was the vague sensation that perhaps he would not disappear that night. The cat's body was cleaned with care. The warm water brought a confusing sensation. Part of him wanted to react, to flee, to resist. Another part no longer had the energy for it. The accumulated cold of the last few days began to slowly yield. It wasn't a cure, it was just a chance. Each breath that stabilized slightly was a small, invisible triumph. On the other side of the room, someone spoke in low tones about severe dehydration, hypothermia, infection. Technical words the cat did not understand, but that the old gentleman recognized as signs that time had indeed been cruel. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, as if organizing ancient thoughts. This situation was not new to him. It was far too familiar. When asked if he was the one responsible for the animal, the old man replied only that he had been the one who stopped. He didn't try to assume more than that. He didn't say, "He's mine." He didn't say, "I'm taking him." He said only the essential truth. He was the one who decided not to keep walking. The sentence hung in the air for a moment, heavier than it seemed. The cat was placed in a small heated box with soft light. His eyes closed for a few moments, then opened again. He felt his body heavy, but he no longer felt the cold of the sidewalk. The silence there was different. It wasn't abandonment. It was controlled care. For the first time in days, he didn't need to be alert to survive. Even so, habit kept him partially awake. The old man approached the box slowly. He didn't touch. He just stood there. He watched the weak movement of the cat's chest rising and falling. Each breath was a reminder of how close everything had been to ending. He swallowed hard, feeling an old pressure in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was memory. While they waited, someone brought water for the old man. He accepted it but didn't drink immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the cat. At some point, almost like an involuntary reflex, he began to speak. Not to the others, to himself. Loose words with no clear sequence. Comments on how the streets change, but stay the same. About how people pass by too fast. About how no one wants to carry more weight than they already have. Gradually, the story began to form. The old man told how, many years before, he also passed through that street almost every day. Not as a hurried pedestrian, but as someone who had nowhere to go. He slept on similar sidewalks. He was ignored by faces that changed daily. He wasn't seen as a threat, nor as someone worthy of help. He was just another body occupying the wrong space. He said he survived because, on one specific day, someone stopped. They didn't make a speech. They didn't promise anything. They just stopped. They offered something simple, a small gesture that arrived when time, too, was almost running out. That memory never left him, not as romantic gratitude, but as a silent debt to the world. When he saw the cat lying on that sidewalk, something aligned within him immediately. It wasn't pity, it was recognition. He knew what it was like to lie there, being observed for seconds that never turned into action. He knew what it was like to feel the body give up while the world kept functioning. He didn't need to think much. His body stopped before his mind decided. The cat, oblivious to this story, began to react a little more. A slight paw movement, an adjustment of position, small signs that made someone comment that he was responding. It wasn't a guarantee of survival, but it was progress. The old man took a deep breath for the first time since he had entered. Hours passed slowly. The clinic grew quieter as the night progressed. The cat slept in short intervals, sometimes waking with small, involuntary movements. The old man stayed there the entire time. He didn't leave. He didn't complain. He didn't ask how long it would take. He knew that certain waits do not allow for distraction. In one of those moments of waking, the cat opened his eyes and saw the old man again. The image wasn't sharp, but the recognition came more through sensation than sight. It was the same smell, the same rhythm of presence. The cat blinked slowly and closed his eyes again. Not because he was giving up, but because, perhaps for the first time, he felt he could rest. When the morning began to brighten outside, someone finally spoke with more certainty. The cat had passed through the worst moment. He was still weak, still needed intensive care, but he had crossed the most critical part. The old man heard the information in silence, nodding slightly. He didn't smile, he didn't celebrate, he just stayed there, as he had always done since he stopped on the street. That moment wasn't a happy ending, it was a turning point. The cat would still have a long road. The old man still carried his past. But something fundamental had happened. Two beings ignored by the world had recognized each other at the exact instant it could still make a difference. And, outside the clinic, the street remained the same. People passed by, hurried, distracted, oblivious to what almost happened there. They would never know how close that cat came to disappearing. They would never know that on that same sidewalk, a simple decision had interrupted an old cycle of indifference. The cat's recovery did not happen all at once. There was no clear moment when anyone could say he was out of danger. Instead, there was a succession of small, almost imperceptible improvements, interspersed with silent relapses that kept everyone in a state of constant alertness. His body was still too fragile to trust. Every change in the rhythm of his breathing, every slower movement, made time seem to slip away again. The old gentleman followed everything without interfering. He did not feel like the owner of that situation, only responsible for not leaving. He would sit in the same chair, observing, learning the minute signs that indicated progress or warning. He did not ask excessive questions. He knew that when time is short, waiting is also a form of care. The cat, still drowsy, seemed to recognize that constant presence, even without understanding its permanence. When the cat was finally released from the heated box for short periods, the world presented itself in fragments once more. The floor was still strange, the smells were still too intense, and his body responded slowly to any attempt at movement. He would walk a few steps and stop, as if he were relearning how to exist outside the cold sidewalk that had shaped him in recent days. There was no hurry. Haste had almost killed him before. The old gentleman was advised to take him home, at least temporarily. The word temporarily hung in the air like something undefined. No one knew if the cat would fully survive, nor if the man could handle something that required so much care. Still, he accepted without argument, not because he felt prepared, but because he knew the alternative was letting him return to a place where time had already run out once. The way to the old man's house was silent. The cat was wrapped in clean fabric, feeling the gentle sway with every step. There was no aggressive noise from the street, nor the biting cold. Even so, the cat kept his eyes half open, alert, as if waiting for all of that to be suddenly taken away. Life had taught him not to trust changes that were too rapid. The house was small, simple, marked by years of continuous use. There was no luxury, no excess. There was a silent order. The old man placed the cat in a warmed corner, prepared in advance, as if he had already thought of it even before stopping on the street. The cat observed everything with contained attention. Every object seemed to have a defined place. That predictability brought a strange sense of security. In the first few days, the cat hardly moved. He slept for long periods, waking only to drink water and accept small amounts of food. The old man respected those limits. He did not try to stimulate him beyond what was necessary. He simply remained. Nearby, reading, organizing things, living, the cat began to associate that environment with something he had never had: stability. Still, the fear did not disappear. At times, the cat would wake up startled, as if he were back on the sidewalk. His body would tremble slightly, and he would seek the furthest corner. The old man did not approach during those moments. He knew it wasn't the time. He had learned throughout his own life that certain wounds only calm down when they are not touched. As the days passed, small changes began to emerge. The cat started to lift his head when the old man entered the room. Later, he began to observe him for longer. One day, he took 2 steps in his direction before stopping. The old man pretended not to notice. He didn't want to turn it into a test. The cat needed to choose on his own. The feeding began to take effect. The body, once rigid and cold, was slowly recovering some flexibility. His fur was still dull, but it no longer stuck to his skin as before. The cat began to groom himself, a simple gesture that carried enormous meaning. It was a sign that the instinct for self-preservation was returning. Even so, there was always the feeling that everything could be lost. A different sneeze, a day when the cat refused food, a moment of prolonged apathy. Each of these signs made the old man relive the image of the sidewalk, the motionless body, the time almost gone. He did not speak about it, but he carried the fear in silence, as he always had. On one specific afternoon, while the light entered through the window softly, the cat decided to move beyond the space he knew. He walked slowly to the middle of the room and stopped, looking around. It was new territory. The old man was sitting a few meters away, motionless. The cat hesitated, took one more step, and then sat down. There was nothing extraordinary in that gesture for those observing from the outside. For the cat, it was a huge decision. He was occupying space. The old man noticed but did not react. He just took a deep breath and remained. The cat stayed there for a few minutes, then went back to his corner. But something had been tested and approved. The world had not collapsed because he showed himself. This realization began to repeat in small doses every day. The relationship between them was not built on immediate affection. There was no lap, no constant petting. There was respect. There was time. The cat began to follow the old man with his eyes when he stood up. At times he followed him for a few steps. The old man spoke little, but sometimes he murmured simple phrases, as if he were narrating his own routine. The cat listened to the tone more than the words. On a silent night, the cat approached closer than ever. He did not touch. He just lay down a short distance from the old man, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to flee if he needed to. The old man noticed, but did not move. They stayed like that for long minutes. 2 beings, marked by abandonment, sharing the same space without demanding anything from each other. At GEU moment, the cat still didn't know if that would be permanent. He still didn't know if that house would be a shelter or just a pause before another fall. But something inside him began to change. Not full trust, but the willingness to try to exist in another way. And that was all he could offer at that stage. The old man, for his part, understood that this story was not guaranteed. He knew the recovery could fail. He knew the past does not disappear. Still, he stayed there, because for him it wasn't just about saving a cat. It was about not repeating the gesture that almost killed him many years ago, passing straight by. The decision did not come as an announcement. There was no solemn moment in which the old gentleman said out loud that the cat would stay. The choice revealed itself gradually, in the details, in the fact that he stopped thinking about when all this is over and began to organize the house as if the cat were already a part of it. The temporary began to lose its meaning without anyone needing to name it. The cat noticed before any words existed. He noticed it in the constancy, in the schedules that did not change, in the food that always appeared in the same place, in the absence of haste. His life had always been marked by abrupt interruptions. Now the days linked together in a predictable way. This predictability, so common for many, was something completely new to him. There was still fear. On some days, the cat would wake up suspicious, as if he were waiting for that routine to be withdrawn without warning. He moved with caution, tested limits, retreated when something seemed different. The old man understood these retreats. He never interpreted them as rejection. He knew that trust is not built with declarations, but with repetition. As the weeks passed, the cat's body responded better. His weight began to increase slowly. His fur gained some shine. His movements became less rigid. He began to explore other rooms in the house, always with care, always keeping clear escape routes. The old man did not interfere. He did not close doors on purpose. He did not force an approach. He knew that this cat needed, above all, to feel that he had a choice. On a silent morning, something simple happened. The old man was sitting at the table having coffee when he felt a light weight brush against his leg. It wasn't a jump. It wasn't an explicit request. It was just the cat approaching and leaning his body for a few seconds before moving away again. The old man did not react immediately. He didn't want to turn GU gesture into a spectacle. He just stayed there, breathing deeply, allowing the moment to exist without pressure. That brief contact marked something definitive. The cat was not just surviving in that space. He was beginning to inhabit it, not as a possession, not as an obligation, but as his own choice. For someone who almost disappeared without being noticed, choosing to stay was a profound act. The old gentleman also changed. The presence of the cat silently reorganized his routine. He began to go out less, to observe more. Small pauses became part of the day, not out of vigilance, but for companionship. Two beings accustomed to solitude learned to coexist without invading each other's space. On some days, the old man would sit near the window and watch the street. The cat, sometimes, would sit beside him looking in the same direction. People passed by in a hurry, as always. The street had not changed. The world remained indifferent. But something there was different now. The cat was no longer part of that flow of forgetfulness. He had been removed from the cruel logic of someone must take care of it. There was a day when the old man passed again by the same sidewalk where he had found the cat. The place was dry, ordinary, indistinct. People passed by without noticing anything special. He stopped for a few seconds, just looking. He thought about how many stories end there every day without witnesses. He thought about how many simple decisions could have changed entire destinies. When he returned home, the cat was waiting for him, lying in a spot lit by the sun. He raised his head upon hearing the door and blinked slowly. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He just recognized. The old man felt an ancient weight dissolve a little more, not because he had saved someone, but because he had interrupted a cycle. The definitive choice was not saving the cat that night. It was not letting him return to the street when the crisis passed. It was assuming that stopping once creates responsibility, that seeing someone at risk changes who you are. The old man knew this better than anyone. The cat, for his part, would never know how close he had been to disappearing. He would never know how many people passed straight by while time was running out. But that no longer mattered. What mattered was that now he had a place where time did not run against him. Before closing this story, I leave an important request. If you were moved by this journey, leave your like now. Subscribe to the channel. I have a dream of reaching 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription really makes a difference. And tell me in the comments, from which country are you watching this story? Not every rescue story begins with heroism. Some begin with someone who simply slows down. The cat in this story did not ask for help out loud. He simply remained while the world passed by too fast to hear, and that almost cost him everything. The old gentleman did not change the world. He did not save everyone. He simply interrupted a moment of indifference while there was still time. And sometimes that is enough to change an entire destiny. What makes this story powerful is not the ending, but the point at which someone decided not to keep walking. How many times do we walk straight past something that clearly needs attention, telling ourselves that it isn't our responsibility? How many stories end like that, without witnesses, without different choices? This cat survived not because he was the strongest, but because someone chose to see him. May this story remain as a silent reminder. Stopping does not require great resources, only awareness. And when we do it, we do not only save the one on the ground, we save something inside ourselves as well. Thank you for staying until the end.